Did Arkane Studios work on Spec Ops The Line? If all you want's the answer, then it's yes. Yeah, they did. But if you want to know exactly how I got to that answer, and what all they did on Spec Ops The Line, then stay tuned. We're gonna delve into that. So quick recap. Spec Ops The Line came out in 2012, published by 2K Games, made by Yager Entertainment and Darkside Game Studios. Yager handled single-player, Darkside handled multiplayer. The state of the game in 2012 is different than what was shown off in the 2008 initial previews and the E3 2010 trailers. It changed a lot over time, and based on files within the localization and leftover textures and models, it seems like the overall style of the game was headed in a different direction. And I don't think it's just because of changing priorities. No, the reason for that is because of the involvement, or the lack of involvement, of a certain studio. If you go on to Arkane Games' history, they worked on Bioshock 2, aspects of it, in 2010. They released Dishonored in 2012. They were working on a Dark Messiah expansion back in around 2008. That leaves gaps between 2008 and 2010, 2010 and 2012. Where am I going with this? Well, if you go through the localization files of Spec Ops The Line, you'll find the leftover remnants of the Exodus co-op campaign that also had a versus mode. This includes all of the objectives for it and the briefings. In the final mission for it, there is an objective labeled as Arkane Test This Please. Now, at the time I found it, I just dismissed it. I thought it was just some tongue-in-cheek thing. I figured there was no real meaning to it at all. But I've been revisiting it lately because if you dig through Spec Ops The Line's files, there are more references to Arkane, with muzzle effects that apparently were made by them or labeled as being by them, and some audio files that are linked back to Arkane, along with some textures, primarily HUD icons. Unused HUD icons from the 2010 era of development, from what it seems like. And they're listed as Arkane, and the spelling is the same as Arkane Studios. It made me wonder if they were tied to it. Now, Bioshock 2 and Dishonored both use Unreal Engine 3. So, the studio has experience with the same engine used for Spec Ops The Line. And there is a gap in their resume where they could have worked on Spec Ops, because development for Spec Ops went on from 2008 to 2012, roughly. Does this mean I think they worked on it? Well, they still partnered with 2K Games to work on Bioshock 2. And same goes for Dishonored. On top of that, if you look closely in the credits of the opening of the 2010 multiplayer build of Spec Ops The Line, you can see a reference to Arkane Studios. To me, this is all the proof I need. Arkane was involved with Spec Ops in some way. They were involved in the development up until at least the 2010 multiplayer beta, after which they departed for some reason or another, either to finish work on Bioshock 2 or to start work on Dishonored. Now, we've established that they probably did work on the game, but what did they do for it? And I think I know the answer to that as well. I believe Arkane Studios worked on Exodus. I think the original vision for the game was simple. Yager was going to do the campaign, Arkane was going to do the multiplayer component, which was going to be a co-op and versus campaign. It'd be much more up their alley to have a story-driven multiplayer component. Arkane did handle aspects of Bioshock 2, which does have multiplayer, but it seems like they primarily handled story-related stuff. Story levels and things of that sort. I'd actually spoken with a member of Darkside Studios, the guys who handled multiplayer in the latter half of Spec Ops development. They said multiplayer was being handled by another studio before they took over, though it isn't clear who that was exactly. They didn't specify it. The developer also said that Exodus was being worked on before they arrived, and there were aspects of it that got rolled into the existing multiplayer levels. I'm not sure if this just means the multiplayer maps, or if this also means the co-op DLC that came out for free after release. What I think is this. When the game started development, 2K wanted a multiplayer component. That much is clear. They really thought multiplayer for their games was the future. Yager would handle single-player stuff, and in this case, Arkane would handle multiplayer. They'd create Exodus, which would tie directly into the story. It'd be the story of how Gray Fox, the CIA team, arrived in Dubai and their clashes with the 33rd. Would have been sort of like Left 4 Dead in a way. 3 players from Gray Fox would have taken on either bots together, or they would have taken on 5 players from the 33rd, who would be using their multiplayer classes. There would be options to use boss classes and tougher classes as you progress through each campaign segment. There would be 3 days of the campaign with 3 sections for a total of 9 levels, so to speak. And based on what images are still left over, especially within the 2010 multiplayer beta, it sounds like it was finished to a degree. The voice acting isn't final, especially for Farid, who only has placeholder lines, but it sounds like it was playable to a degree, at least for testing purposes. Why it was cut isn't clear. Maybe quality control, maybe they weren't happy with the way it was turning out, maybe 2K thought a traditional multiplayer experience was ideal, and they shelved the Versus campaign in favor of a regular 6v6 multiplayer mode, which was a really bad idea. They really screwed the pooch there, but it's what they wanted for all their games. It's also why The Darkness 2 didn't get any DLC. With all of that in mind, of what I think Arkane did, what all happened and went into development, I suppose there's one last question to consider, and that is, does a build exist with Exodus in it? The 2010 multiplayer beta does have leftovers of Exodus. There's an older model for rigs with darker, dirtier textures. There are a bunch of voice files for the announcers and for the Gray Fox team. The 33rd team just would have used their regular multiplayer voice lines. And there are some references to like the levels and everything else, sort of like how it is in the final game. I'm not sure if a build like that exists. I'm less certain about that than the Vienna build of Manhunt 2. I want to believe that there is a somewhat complete 2010 era build of Spec Ops, because it sounds like, for the most part, the vision in the game was done by the time E3 rolled around. It's just that there were changes in the vision and the priorities of it by that time. Multiplayer was reworked at least a couple of times, and some revisions were done to the story to add some more aspects of hallucinations and trauma, which probably benefited the story, but I'm just going off what we know. In the end, I don't know why Arkane is not fully credited in the final game, maybe just because Exodus was pulled entirely, but also people were kind of tight-lipped about that. Nobody directly named Arkane as the creator of Exodus. That's kind of why I had to do guesswork, and why all those references to Arkane just went over my head whenever I would data mine Spec Ops. Maybe it's like Rockstar Vienna with Manhunt 2. They were pulled off the project, closed abruptly, and as a result, they aren't usually tied to it despite the work they did. Maybe it's the inverse of that, where after Arkane's contribution was shelved, they want to just move on and not take credit for anything, which I would get. And to be fair, they did have a huge success with Dishonored, so it's not like this broke them, unlike with what happened to Rockstar Vienna. It's just interesting, though, especially because this was a secret in plain sight. For 2 years now we've had that beta, and it never occurred to me that Arkane Studios could refer to, Arkane, like the one in the in the descriptions of the effects and the level. Can't believe I missed that, but I'm fairly certain that's what was going on, and that's what they worked on. And if you guys have any other thoughts, let me know. If you think I'm off base there, or if you have more insights to offer, or if you'd like me to do a full video on that conversation I had with that Darkside Game Studios developer. Thank you all for watching. Take care.